Hello and welcome back to SML Total Access. I'm Primetime Triple Zero, and joined by me, as always, are my trusted co-hosts Dan and Matt. How's it going, fellas?
Hey man, playoff races are heating up, even though outside isn't. So I'm getting excited.
Yeah,
Let's go. This is big boy season coming up.
let's go. Hey, let's start off first down. We got some resurgent members in the SML, and I don't know if you guys want to highlight anybody or if you're proud of anybody for the season they're having so far.
Yeah, I think if everybody looked at the standings, I think the two that would stand, or one that would stand out for sure, would be Field, 9-4, and you could say, oh, he has an easy schedule, blah blah blah, but he generally always does have an easy schedule or that last place schedule, and he normally doesn't do this. So he swept his the most competition in his division, which is Bean. So right now he's actually the 3 seed, I believe, in the AFC, and because he has that tiebreaker, even though they're both 9-4. So I'm impressed with Field. Not the hardest schedule, but again, you can only beat who you play, and he's done a really good job. He does have Faz and Paulie coming up in a couple weeks back to back. That'll be a really good test. I'm not Monty. He's a good player with a last place schedule. Nothing stands out. He beat you Prime, and that was the Super Bowl. But
Yeah.
this is what I expect with that team. He's a good player. He's proven that. He's got a last place schedule. I expect this. But I'm gonna give KJ a little bit of love. Number one pick last year. He's got 4 wins this year. I know 4-9. Why are you talking about a guy that's 4-9? But he's played some really close games. He gave Dan a battling. The first game, Dan had to beat him on a last second field goal. So I think if we really dig deep, KJ's another guy that I think is I want to give some kudos to. He's playing better, and he can hopefully build on this and continue go from 1 win to 4 this season, and then maybe next season 6-8. I'd love to see that.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I think this might be the year of the resurgent SML. I mean, it's all over the board. Matt hit some of the key guys, but I think you can look elsewhere. You could look even Paulie, okay, quote unquote tanking Paulie season one. Now is playing really good ball. You can look at Graham's. I mean, Graham's back. He's battling for a playoff spot, and actually looking at his schedule, I think he has a good shot at that. We mentioned Monty, we mentioned Fields, KJ, all having good years. Even look at Bean. I mean, I don't know what to make of Bean. He looks really good and beats Bomber, shuts him out, then beat me earlier, then loses some games he shouldn't. So, but he's playing good and taking control of that division. So, I think this is a great year for the resurgence in the SML.
Yeah, I'm looking at Field, obviously. Looks like he's got a good chance at making the playoffs, which is awesome. But the guy who I'm kind of surprised by the most is Doink. I mean, he missed the playoffs last year. He's 11-2, and really he hasn't had any major shakeups to his team. He's just playing a lot better, and some would say maybe it's at the benefit of a lesser schedule, but he does have wins over guys like QP, for example, and QB Stud. So he's got a few good signature wins. He's first in his conference, and he's playing good football. And looking at his schedule, he's got Coop, he's got Grams, and he's got Finns, and then Dan. So I mean, looking at it, this guy might be the conference leader in the NFC. So yeah, I'm looking at Doink and then Field from the AFC, who right now has a chance to win his division, which is surprising. Let's move on now to second down here. And I'm looking at practice injuries. I see it in chat all the time. And I'm curious, do you guys think practice injuries are a big deal? Is it happening too much? Or what's your feelings on practice injuries?
Yeah, I think practice injuries are kind of right where they should be. The problem I have is, and I don't have the full data, but I'm not sure what the difference is between full practice, half pads, and then half pads, all backups. I think if you go half pads, all backups, I don't think any of your guys will get hurt or they get hurt less. But I don't know that for a fact, so I might get chewed out in main chat or whatever. I've shared a theory or two that wasn't correct, but I think they are pretty good when you go full pads and practice everybody. You should get guys hurt. I mean, that's the risk. My problem is it should have an alternative, and I'm not sure that alternative is there yet. Because if you don't want to get any injuries, there should be something you should do to avoid injuries.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat. I don't get the complaining. I mean, we're a sim. What's in our name? We're a sim Madden League. Everyone is here because they don't want to play mud. I mean, they want to play a game that replicates the NFL. Well, we do that on and off the field. We do free agency. We do drafts. We have trade rules. We have practice injuries are a part of real life and it's part of the sim aspect. So yeah, if you go full pads and a guy gets hurt, it is what it is. I think the issue is last year it felt like if you went half pads, you were good. Like you never got any. Now I went half pads before I played prime earlier in this season. I lost Derwin James for 2 weeks to a broken finger on half pads. So I think it's just there's some newness to it where people are seeing it more often, and it's at least giving the perception that they're increased, that EA screwed something up or whatever. I'm with Dan though. I wish EA was a little bit more transparent and that they said, hey, if you do full pads, this is kind of what you're going to get, but you have the risk of injury. If you do it this way, you are guaranteed no injuries. Because then, it's not so RNG where you might lose. I think Bomber lost Brees Hall, which is basically his entire offense right now. And I think he did have pads. So there should be a way that you can say no injuries at all. You don't get very much XP. That way, come playoff time, it's not like, oh, well, Bomber lost Brees Hall. I didn't lose anybody. Easy win for me. That's what I wish for. But the complaining, it's sim. Injuries are part of football.
Hey
Yeah,
Matt, real quick, when you do half pads, do you do your backups or do you still leave the starters in?
Dan, I don't have time to do all that other stuff. I just did half pad starters.
Yeah. See, I wonder if you do half pads, all backups, if that helps.
I
Just my
do.
one thought.
I do half pads and split reps, half pads and half starters and half backups for every position. And I'm sure somebody's had it happen, but knock on wood, I've never had an injury in 2 cycles for practice. Never. And um, I'm not saying that it never happens, but it's never happened to me. So I think the odds are slim because I have a large sample size, and my starters are still getting XP. My backups are getting XP. It's not as much, but you know what? I know they're going to suit up to play. I just don't like the guys who go full pads, full starters, and then they get their guys injured, and then they cry about it. So how many times you got to touch the stove and burn your hand before you say, okay, like maybe I should stop touching the stove. Maybe I should do something different. That's my issue with it. I do think they probably do happen a little bit too much, but it's part of the game. I do half pads, half again split reps, and I've never had an injury. And hey, my guys, maybe don't get as much XP, but they're there. So that's how I do it.
Well,
And
see, that's
Prime, you're right.
fascinating. You go ahead.
I was going to say, Prime, you're right on the head with the touch in the stove. We have guys who call cover three and have all their zones 10 yards down the field and wonder why their opponent's hitting the flats all the
Yeah,
time. People just want other things to adjust to them. They don't want to adjust to everything else.
yeah,
Well, I was just going to add the fact that you have all that evidence is gives us zero reason to complain. So you've played whatever all these cycles, all these games, no injuries, and you just gave the formula. So anyone out there that's worried about injuries, just follow that formula, and there might be the solution right there.
so
And practice injuries are up this year. I mean, I think that's a lot of it. I mean, they
yeah.
are increased. I don't have data, but just my gut in a season and a half is telling me they're higher than they were last year. And I think that's part of it too.
Yeah. And I do think part of it, again, is the split reps, not all backups. Because if you do all backups, then one of your backups is going to get hurt and so on. So split reps. Let's move on now. Third down. This has kind of been a hot topic in chat. Bomber lost again. I think it was shut out by Bean, if I'm not mistaken, and then scored 3 points against Clinky. So between last 2 games, he's scored 3 points. Um, is Bomber in trouble? And Matt, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I've got an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. I'll start with the angel. The angel says he's second in points allowed, fifth in yards allowed, 10th in passing yards allowed, and sixth in rushing yards allowed. That's a heck of a defensive performance. If you have a defense like that, you're probably doing pretty well. And he is 9-4, and he was only had 2 losses for a while until recently. Then the devil says he's 22nd in points scored, 19th in yards gained, 25th in passing yards. He is second in rushing yards with Brees Hall. Again, I mentioned he's the only offense. Yes, he's in big trouble. You can have a great defense, but your offense can't be this porous where your defense has to play legitimately perfect. Your defense is, and in some of these games, his defense has to really score points, and they haven't been. He got shut out 28-0 by Bean. He only scored 3 against Klink, who, I mean, that's kind of a game I'd expect. But trust me, I've been in this position before where my offense is terrible, my defense is good. Sometimes you feel like, hey, if my defense doesn't score points, I'm losing this game. And his offense it doesn't need to be great. It needs to be better because, the more chances you give your opponent by punting, the more chances they get to score. They're eventually going to break through, and then you're in big trouble. He's thrown 21 interceptions. He's even said he needs to get that down. Obviously, giving good field position. Couple of field. I beat him 9-0, 3 field goals. He couldn't move the ball, so he's in trouble on offense. Once he gets in the playoffs and the talent that he's facing increases, he's in big trouble if he could not figure out how to get this passing game going. And he's got Travis Kelsey and Keenan Allen. I thought that was going to solve his problems. It hasn't. He's right where he was before.
Dan, is it true?
Yeah, I think what Matt said is right on the head there as well. I think he is in trouble, although I think Bomber's proven in the past to overcome some of these kind of mid-season slumps that he goes through. It's almost like every season there's about a 3-4 game window where you just look at Bomber and say, well, what is he doing? But what Matt said there at the very end, I think, is the most important part. He went out and got Kelsey and Keenan Allen to improve his passing attack, and it just hasn't worked. And so his idea that he needed better weapons isn't proving to helping him. There's more something fundamentally wrong. There's a scheme issue. There's a concept issue that he's not figuring out. And I do think that that's going to haunt him. I think, as Matt said, when he hits some of this talent in the playoffs, and if the other guys just aren't turning the ball over, I don't know if he can score enough to win. But having said that, he just played Prime really tough, almost 3 games ago. And so I'm not giving up on Bomber. I think Bomber is going to be all right. But that offense does worry me.
I don't think that Bombers diminished too much from last cycle. I do think that taking the Jets has hurt him. Last cycle, I think his passing game was just as good as it is this cycle. But the problem is he doesn't have Hall is good, but he's still not what Nick Chubb was last year, especially when he got Freight Train going. And his defense is good this year, but last year he had so many abilities that he would create more turnovers. I don't want to blame it completely on the team, but this isn't just a Bomber issue as much as it is. I mean, you see great players, and then when they take teams that aren't elite, then we immediately start burying the player. And last cycle, I mean, Dan took the Falcons, and then he was going up against Faz, who had the Panthers, which was a top 3 Madden team. And Faz really, I mean, he took it to Dan. I mean, just took it to him. And everybody was saying, "Oh, Dan's washed." Well, really, Dan took the Falcons. Well, I mean, I take the Colts every year, and I mean, there's shows about me recently, first and goal or whatever. It's like, okay, well, I take the Colts. I mean, if I had a whole cycle with the Browns or whoever, then I'm probably going to win 3 Sombardis. But I take the Colts because they're my favorite team. You look at Faz, he took the Jaguars. Now he had the Bills and he had the Panthers last year. If he took an elite team this year, he probably wouldn't have had the slump early on. I guess my point is that Bomber is the same player he was last year. He's more of a team builder, and he relies on a great team more than some of the other Big Five do. And the biggest problem I see is actually the guys he's losing to don't have super elite teams. I mean, he lost to me. I don't have a super elite team. He lost to Bean. Bean doesn't really have a super elite team. So I do think that Bomber needs to really, since he isn't making up for it on his team front, and usually team building is a strong suit, and now he traded for some old guys who are going to last maybe 2 more seasons. I think he's got himself in a bit of a predicament. So I think he needs to rework his offense to be a legit Super Bowl contender. But he plays good defense. He runs the ball well. He watches streams. He's going to be in just about every game come playoff time. I don't think he strikes the fear in a lot of players right now, and part of it is just because he took the Jets. And unless if he somehow hits the lottery with some crazy trades, I don't see that changing too much.
Now he does have Woods as first, so that does help him this upcoming draft. And I will push back. Bean does have a super team.
You think Bean does have a
Bengals team
super
is
team?
loaded.
They are offensively.
That team's loaded.
Offensively,
Yeah, and I will say, even though I just kind of buried him, I wasn't trying to just his offense, but he is the 2 seed right now. So I mean, all the struggles that we talked about, he's currently the 2 seed. But they say pitching wins World Series in the MLB and baseball. Defense wins championships in football, and he's got the defense. And another thing, he's been there before. So when it comes playoff time, especially, you look at Field. You look at Bean, who has not had any success in the playoffs. If Bomber gets against these guys, I don't care what his offense does. He's been there before. He's gonna, the bright lights aren't too big for him. And if his defense can play perfect, and he can, I mean, if he made the Super Bowl, I wouldn't be shocked. I just think that his offensive woes, like you said, he doesn't strike that fear in people. He used to be afraid to have to play Bomber. If you get him in the playoffs now, I don't think you're scared to play him.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Um, let's move on now. Fourth down. Talking about playoffs, the AFC pretty much locked up already. The NFC's interesting. Dan, what do you think about this NFC playoff race?
Yeah, I think there's some really good battles at the top for the one seed. I think Doink and I next week are going to be playing for the one seed. There's some other guys still in play. Monty's still in play for the one seed. But you look at the wild cards. You look at 6 and 7. I think there's about 4 teams right now that are battling out for those two spots. I think Dump might be in trouble because of maybe some traveling. Still has his quarterback hurt, but you look at Gouda and D Muse have a game coming up this next advance, which pretty much could be a playoff game. If D Muse loses that, he might be in trouble. You look at Graham's. I think he's got 3 out of the next 4 very winnable games. But we've seen Graham's before in the same spot where he had very winnable games, and then he loses both of them. So, man, it's going to be exciting. I think a lot of things can happen, but I'm gonna say that D Muse and Grams are gonna sneak into the playoffs. I think Gouda might be out actually.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's a great race. I Dump is out. Dump's right there with 6 losses, but he is taking a forced loss to Graham's because of he's in Arizona right now. Dump is for the Cougs game. Go Cougs! That's going to eliminate him. No quarterback, blah blah blah. But that's a big win for Graham's. I felt like that was probably the one game outside of Doink to end the season that he might have a chance to draw. He's got Tiny next, and then he's got Fig, and then he's got KJ. You couldn't ask for a better 3 game stretch needing wins to get into the playoffs. He did beat Tiny very close the first game, but I expect him to win that game. And then if he drops to Doink, he might still be in good shape. So I'm also eyeing Gutta here. Gutta's got D Muse, and then he's got Paulie. He's not out of the race for the North. He is only 1 game back of Paulie. He's actually 1.5 because he did lose the first one, but 23-21. Gutta is playing really good ball. I'm excited to see how he goes. I think he makes it. And I think the people that are out, I think it's going to be Clink, Dom, and Dump are going to be the 3 out,
Wow.
and maybe some personal bias, but give me Grams in the playoffs, baby. I want it. I have known Grams for better part of a decade. He's a great bowler. He's a great guy. He used to be a fantastic man. I mean, you used to be, speaking of fear of playing someone, you used to be scared of Graham's user. You didn't want to see this guy when you needed to win because that user used to be able to cover the whole field. Changing directions kind of hurt him. But give me Grams in the playoffs, baby. I am hyped, and I want to be on the call if and when he makes it.
Matt, I'm telling you right now, what next week when Gouda plays D Muse's defense is going to give Willis all sorts of trouble. D Muse is going to win that game.
I'll say this.
I will say that. But Gutta's performance has been on defense. He's got a really good defense, and I think that's what's carrying him. I think he beats defense.
I actually play Gutta week 6 or not Gutta, excuse me. D Muse week 16, and he beat me in the playoffs. Like I don't know, it's been like 5 months probably. It feels like ago now. But I still haven't forgiven him, and I'd like the opportunity to knock him out of the NFC playoff race a little bit. So I'd like to do that to D Muse. Looking at the playoff, it is interesting. Doink is gonna. I think Doink's gonna be the number 1 seed. I just looking at his schedule, I'm impressed.
You're crazy, man. You're crazy. You crazy. You think I'm losing to Doink next week?
Well, you're gonna beat him. I'm gonna say you're gonna beat him, but he only has 3 losses at that point, and I guess
That's
you do
all I
too.
have
I
too.
guess you do too. I guess you do too. So you would have the tiebreaker over Doink at that point via head to head.
Yep.
At that point, you would play Colt 45, Noel, and Gutta. I take it all back. Dan is going to win the number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, baby.
I'll say that. I'll say that. But Doink has had some decent wins this year, so that's going to be a big game. I'm going to be tuned into that one, especially.
It'll be a close game. He always plays me close. We always have good games.
He's a good player.
But I'm going to win it.
Yeah. I mean, hey, work's slowing down for me, I think, so I'm going to be off a few days next week, and I'm excited to watch that. I'm looking at also the QP 9-4. He's going to make the playoffs, obviously. Not going to win his division. And for for Dan, I didn't mean to make this completely about Dan, but I think that's a big deal because I mean he swept Dan three games last cycle or last season, excuse me, and now he's going to lose that division, and he's already lost to Dan once. So going into the playoffs, QP doesn't have that bye week, and he had lost to Dan, so that's going to be an interesting dynamic heading in the playoffs in the NFC that I'm kind of looking forward to. But I think Dom is going to miss the playoffs. Dan's going to be the number one seed, and QP is going to have to work for it to make the Super Bowl, and I'm all for that. Um,
Come on, Grams. Come on, Peepaw. You got this, buddy.
So there you go. Moving on now to the extra point. Matt, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so I normally don't do spoilers, but spoiler, QP, he's out. He is
Whoa,
not on my
whoa,
top five. Get
whoa,
him out of here. You
whoa.
cannot lose to Grams, who I just raved about the person. But I'm sorry, QP. What are you doing, buddy? And then you go in and you start ranting about a play call that Dan called for the first time in the million years I've known him. Get out of here. You're gone. You're gone. At number five, taking his spot is Monty. I'm really impressed with Monty. I think he's a good player. That's why he's number five. He's 10-3. Why isn't he higher? Well, he's got the last place schedule, which when you have a player of this caliber, um, when you start playing a last place schedule, I expect higher things from you, especially with a team like Carolina. Um, so I've got Monty there. Proud of him. I know his schedule was a big topic of discussion coming into the cycle. Prime, you gave him a chance, and it looks like it's worked out. So I'm happy that Monty is doing well. At number four, I've got Dan. Again, another guy that is 10-3. Dan's got some nice wins. Obviously, if he can beat Doink, who's a little bit higher on this list coming up, he'd propel him. I think Dan's just kind of that guy. Like he's 10-3. You don't really pay much attention to him because you just know he's going to be around come playoff time. And so you just kind of wait until the playoffs and see how it shakes out. But of course, Dan's a staple on the list. At number three, I've got Doink. Um,
Wow.
11-2. What can you say? Another guy. His division isn't that tough. I know we've seen the resurgence of Grams, but Tiny and Woods. I don't know. They're still trying to figure things out. He does have some signature wins, though. There's no doubt about that. So at 11-2, I don't care who you're playing in the SML. The talent top to bottom is strong enough that if you can win 11 of 13 games, and regardless of who you're playing, that's impressive. I'm happy with Doink. And that's a good team. I think we need to realize that that's a really good team. The only question mark is it really a quarterback, and he seems to have found a way to get around that. So I'm impressed with him. And then at number two, I've actually got Faz. And I know you might say, "Oh, Faz is 9-4. How do you have?" Well, two of those games were forced losses, and so I'm not going to hold those against him. But he's got wins over Prime. He's got wins over Dan. He's got the rest of this. He's got Monty coming up, so obviously that'll be a big game next week for the list. So I've got Faz. He looks really good. He looks a lot better than he used to. And then at number one, I mean, I might as well just tattoo this one on me as number one. It's you, Prime.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
what can you really say? You're the top dog in the AFC, which I think is the better conference. At least has the more elite players. And yeah, you dropped a game to Monty, excuse me. That happens. You lost to Faz. Can't hold that against you. He's a great player. You played him. It's hard to beat someone three times. It's even harder to beat him four times. It is what it is. So yeah, the AFC is going to run through Indy, and I'm excited, just like it did last season. I'm excited to see how it goes.
I
What
love it.
happened last season too, Matt?
I love it. Hey, that's okay, Dan. You know what? I play Dom, I play Dump, and I play Faz all in a row to finish the season. I'm gonna sweep those boys, and I'm gonna come into the AFC playoffs kind of with some confidence. Uh, you know, God of War had my attention recently. I enjoyed that game, and I think everybody should play it. But now I'm going to channel my inner Kratos, and I'm going to rip through the AFC this year and try to get that Simbardi. So everybody on first and goal,
Prime, do you
shut
have
up.
do you have Faz week 18?
Yeah, I do.
What are you going to do if you got the division and the number one seed clinch? You going to rest your guys?
If yeah, if I have the division and number one seed locked up, then I'll rest my guys. Honestly, yeah. But because I have a Dan theory that the game is coded to have starters get injured last week of the season. They even have a commentary line that's kind of lined up to do it. I don't have a record to play for at that point, and I'll just rest my guys.
All right, well that's multiple weeks off without playing your best ball. Then that puts you a little dangerous there in the divisional round.
I'm not worried. I have no fear. I have no fear. Guys, That's SML Total Access, a perfect list by Matt as usual. Dan, thanks for coming on. Guys, SML Total Access, playoff time. We're ramping up in the SML. Guys, this was our weekly episode. Have a good Thanksgiving. Have a good Black Friday, Cyber Monday, whatever's coming up, and happy SML playoff time as it's coming up soon. Thanks again. Have a great day.